Shalom and welcome to the Jewish Geography Podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, please share it on your social media, subscribe, leave a review on iTunes, or anything else you can to get it out to more people. You can find all the past episodes of the show, as well as information on taking tours with yours truly, as your guide at rabbieitan.com. Eitan is spelled E-I-T-A-N. That's rabbieitan.com. Now, we've got a great episode for you today, so without further ado, let's jump into the kishkas, the guts of the Jewish question, defining Jewish identity. I was having a conversation recently on Facebook about homosexuality in Judaism. It's a really complex issue, but the short answer is that, according to Orthodox Judaism, homosexual relations are forbidden explicitly in the Torah, and interpreted as such unchallenged through thousands of years of our tradition. There is no way Orthodox Jewry can grant these acts a positive place in our worldview. But just as we can choose to treat our friends and relatives who don't keep kosher as the wonderful, smart, beloved, Jewish people they are, so too with homosexuality. We can't say gay marriage is okay, but we can welcome a gay person and their Jewish partner, if they have one, to pray with us in the synagogue, to eat at our table, and treat them with honor and respect as a person created in the image of God, just as we would any other Jew who doesn't keep some or all of the commandments, the mitzvot. But this episode isn't about homosexuality in Judaism. This episode is about Jewishness. In many of my conversations with more liberal Jews about this and other issues, this question comes up. Do I, as an Orthodox rabbi, think that a gay Jew or a Jew who doesn't keep Shabbat or kosher or whatever is less Jewish than me? So I want to lay that to rest right here. They are just as Jewish as me, because being Jewish is a national, ethnic, and tribal community. Judaism is our national religion, and the Torah is our constitution, the Talmud being its legal code. So being Jewish is not like being Christian, because Christianity, which, as I understand it, is ultimately defined by a common belief. Our community is ultimately defined as a nation, and our national religion, our faith, gives us the outlines of our mission, the rules of engagement with the sacred and the profane, and an entire worldview. Now, I'd be lying if I said I thought it was okay for any Jew not to keep the commandments to the best of their ability. But if you were born to a Jewish mother, or converted according to Orthodox standards, you're Jewish. Mazel tov. For good or for ill, you're one of us. There's no percentage point breakdown of Jewishness. This is a 100% all or nothing deal. This is not dark chocolate. There are no 72% Jews. In fact, we'll still count you as a Jew even if you want to get yourself out. We make it hard for people to become Jews by choice, but we make it impossible to renounce your citizenship of the state of Judaism. We're like the IRS. We will come after your foreign income, even if you live and work abroad. But still, don't I really think you're less Jewish than me since you don't keep the mitzvot? So let me be a little clearer about this analogy. If Jews are a nation with a religion that functions as the basis for our society and worldview, then members don't lose their citizenship because they break the law or common custom. It is true that, from my perspective, I wish every Jew kept all the commandments. And I think that, if you're not, you're transgressing laws that I believe apply to you as a citizen of the Jewish people. But that doesn't take away one iota of the fact that you are a Jew in my eyes, and that we are members of the same people, with a shared destiny, a common mission, and familial responsibility for one another. It also doesn't mean that, just like anyone else I disagree with, I can't respect that you came to different conclusions about life, the universe, and everything in good faith, that you're intelligent, kind, moral, and generally well-intentioned. That's the benefit of the doubt I give to most people, and especially to family. And when it comes down to it, that's really what we are. You're my brother or sister, and no matter our family squabbles, I'd still rather have you seated at the Thanksgiving table with me than not. Come on, brothers, come on, sisters. Whatever our differences, we're family. Now let's stop arguing and carve that bird. When I mentioned in passing a minute ago that a Jew is one either born to a Jewish mother or who converts according to Orthodox standards, I was stepping gingerly over a big can of worms. But now I'm bringing in my wife Daniela to explain the ins and outs of conversion to Judaism. The following is from her blog, letterstojosep.com. That's Josep, Josep.com, and you can read the original along with a ton of great content about Judaism there on her site. Now here's Daniela.
I recently had a discussion with a friend of mine who was adopted as a baby and was raised in a Reformed Jewish family in the USA. When she participated in Jewish events at college, she was dismayed to find that the Orthodox Jewish rabbis there welcomed her as a good friend to the Jews, but not as an actual Jew. I expressed that I was sorry to hear that she felt they were looking down on her and described how Orthodox interpretation of Jewish law makes things tricky. It's hard to hold the paradox of believing 100% in the authority of Jewish law, but also believing 100% in one's right to define oneself and 100% honoring one's upbringing as a Jew. She expressed interest in hearing more about the halacha on the matter, and I thought, I feel a letter to Josep coming on. I did touch very briefly on the topic of Orthodox and halachic conversion to Judaism on my post about the mikvah, which you can find on letterstojosep.com, but conversion definitely deserves its own letter. So, let's take it from the top. Who is a Jew by birth? This is a subject of much controversy, especially relevant in a country where your eligibility to citizenship depends on whether you are officially defined as a Jew. The law of return, which defines who is considered Jewish for Israeli citizenship purposes, is not a halachic definition. You can become an Israeli citizen if you have a Jewish parent or grandparent, or if you are married to someone who falls under that definition. You cannot become an Israeli citizen if you were born to a Jewish parent or grandparent but voluntarily changed your religion. The halachic definition for a Jew by birth is someone who was born to a Jewish mother. According to halakha, it does not matter if you convert to another religion. Once you are Jewish, you are a Jew forever. But in order to be considered a Jew, you must either be born to a Jewish mother or convert. Well, I know it's not very politically correct. I see it as great wisdom, divine or rabbinic, whichever you think the law came from, to invest the responsibility of carrying on Jewish heritage specifically in the hands of mothers. You see very clearly in crypto-Jewish families that it was the women who passed on the traditions and raised their children as secret Jews. Think about it. Almost all those strange remnants of Jewish traditions you find in crypto-Jewish families are practices upheld primarily by women. Practices to do with cooking, like checking eggs for blood, burning a small amount of dough and baking bread, separating milk and meat, etc., sweeping towards the center of the room, lighting Shabbat candles in secret. These are all part of a women's domain historically. It is not the only time the Torah acknowledges women as having more of a natural tendency to be faithful to God and the Torah. There is a cartoon on the oatmeal called How to Suck at Your Religion. While I'm not a particular fan of the condescending attitude or the crude humor, it has some good points, and there is one part that is relevant to our discussion. It goes like this. This is why I'm a fan of Buddhists and Jews. Their attitude is more like, I'm Jewish, and this is awesome. I don't give a raging crap if you're joining or not. In fact, you're not allowed in. This awesome is mine. Well, some might feel the opposite about the exact same thing and claim that we are elitist snobs who think we are in some kind of special club that nobody can join. But that's not true. You can join. We just don't see any reason that you should. We believe that all nations and religions have their own place in the world and their own special mission, and we have no problem with them as long as they observe the 7 Noahide laws, which are the most basic laws of moral conduct. That is, banning murder, sexual immorality, cruelty to animals, theft, idolatry, and cursing God, and requiring establishing a justice system to uphold the previous 6. We don't believe that keeping the Torah and all the obligations required of us as Jews is relevant to most of humanity. And we don't think it makes sense to take on all these extra obligations when they're not required of you. Moreover, we'd rather not make someone into a Jew only to have him not keep the Torah. So, unlike the other major religions, we do not actively encourage conversion. We actually discourage it. Basically, according to Jewish law, you can only convert to Judaism if you absolutely cannot see yourself living any other way. And we have a specific policy to discourage converts. We call it dissuasion, which often manifests in making things more difficult than they have to be. You have to really, really want it. So what does a halachic conversion entail? First of all, living as a halachically observant Jew, as I certainly hope you have gathered by now, requires a lot of knowledge. You have to know how to properly observe Shabbat, getting into the minute details of the actions that are and are not forbidden. You have to know how to properly observe kashrut, about which I had to write 3 blog posts to list the very basics. You have to know how to pray, what blessings to say on what, how to observe each of our bajillion holidays. The list goes on and on. My husband was not raised Orthodox, and he can attest to the difficult learning curve he went through after deciding to become religious. So the first thing you need to do when contemplating conversion is study. A lot. The duration of studying for conversion depends on the individual. For some, it can take a few months. For some, more than a year, or even 2. But it's not enough to study in classes. You have to be immersed in a Jewish community and learn through practice by seeing and experiencing life as a halachically observant Jew. So potential converts usually have adoptive families in the community that take them in, host them for Shabbat and holidays, and generally teach them organically the way a child learns to observe the mitzvot from his family. When the potential convert reaches a level of knowledge that would allow her to observe halacha fully, she appears before a panel of rabbinic judges, a Beit Din, who drill her on her knowledge of Judaism and halacha. If they rule that she is knowledgeable and sincere, she then goes to immerse in the mikveh, after which she is considered a full Jew. I used she in the previous paragraph, even though it applies to men as well, because for men there is an extra step. Before immersing in the mikveh, male converts also must undergo circumcision. Obviously, this is not as simple a procedure as it is for an 8-day-old baby. It is done in a medical setting with local anesthesia. Well, you ask, what about men who are already circumcised? After all, many non-Jewish parents choose to circumcise their sons for medical or aesthetic reasons. The problem is that the circumcision must be performed by a Jew with the intent of fulfilling the mitzvah. So if the original intent of the circumcision was medical or aesthetic, the male convert undergoes a ritual procedure of drawing a drop of blood from the area. This spiritually repurposes the procedure as a mitzvah. So what about children? The rule about the maternal line determining whether a child is a Jew applies at the moment of birth. So if a woman converts while pregnant, the child she gives birth to as a Jew is considered Jewish. However, if she converts after she has already had children, even tiny babies, they must undergo conversion too. But because a child is not obligated in the mitzvot yet, there is no requirement to appear before a Beit Din. Moreover, a Jewish conversion has to be completely voluntary, but a child is not considered by halacha to have moral agency until he or she comes of age. That's bar bat mitzvah, 13 for a boy, 12 for a girl. So the conversion of a child is basically this. He or she is ritually immersed in the mikveh and raised as a Jew. But when bar bat mitzvah, he or she can choose whether he or she wants to accept the yoke of Torah or not. If the child decides he or she is Jewish, the symbolic conversion as a child stays in effect, and the child is considered completely Jewish. If he or she does not want to be Jewish, the conversion is retroactively annulled. In terms of adoption, a child who was not born to a Jewish biological mother is not considered Jewish by halacha, even if he or she is adopted and raised by a committed Jewish family. So in this case, he or she needs to undergo conversion as above. I actually heard of a case recently where an entire family of ultra-Orthodox Jews found out that they were not actually halachically Jewish because their maternal ancestor had not undergone what their rabbinic authority considered a proper conversion. Since it was clear that they intended to keep halacha and had adequate knowledge of it, they did not have to appear before a Beit Din. They just immersed in the mikveh. In cases where there is some doubt about whether a conversion was performed properly, the person may choose to undergo a giur l'chumra, a conversion for the sake of stringency. It would basically be a condensed version of the conversion process without the dissuasion. So what about conservative and reform conversions? The conservative movement has a similar process of conversion, and in the past, since many times the people who sat on the conservative B'tei Din, rabbinic panels, kept Shabbat and kosher to Orthodox standards, some Orthodox authorities consider those conversions to be valid. Nowadays, it's trickier, and usually if someone underwent a conservative conversion and wants to become Orthodox, he or she may choose to undergo another conversion under Orthodox supervision. Reform conversions are different, varying from community to community on the exact procedure. They are generally not recognized by the conservative movement and are definitely not recognized by the Orthodox. I have to add, from firsthand accounts that the rabbinic courts can make life very, very difficult for converts or for adoptive parents, and unnecessarily so. There are sometimes a lot of ugly politics, and this problem is tenfold in Israel, where the rabbinate holds the authority over marriage, divorce, and conversion, and can be picky about whose conversions they accept as valid. Marriages among people of other religions are handled by their religious authorities. If the rabbinate does not consider you Jewish, you can't marry a Jew in Israel. Couples like this often travel to Cyprus or elsewhere to get married. On the one hand, I believe that the rabbinate has good intentions and is trying to prevent major rifts in the Jewish people. On the other hand, I believe that given that Israel is a secular state, there should be an option for civil marriage for people who do not wish to go through the rabbinate. I don't think that the situation as it is now prevents intermarriage or other unions that the rabbinate disapproves of. I think all it does is make people hate the rabbinate and the religion they present. The issue of who is considered halakhically Jewish, especially in a world where a majority of Jews do not follow halakha and accept a more liberal definition of Judaism, is a very sensitive and sticky issue for all involved. The point of conflict for the friend who I mentioned at the top of the post is that she was born to a non-Jewish biological mother and adopted by a Reform family that did not believe there was any need to convert her. So her family, her community, and of course she herself define her as Jewish, but halakha does not. I can only imagine how infuriating and demeaning it must feel to have someone tell you that according to their beliefs, you are not what you have always known you are. I wish there were a more comfortable middle ground.
Hey you, the smart, educated, Jewishly involved, non-Orthodox listener. You thought I was going to sneak away without dealing with the really hard part, didn't you? You thought I'd let Daniela talk about conversion in her wonderful way, and then tiptoe away slowly. Oh no, that's not me. Above, I mentioned that if you're Jewish, you're 100% Jewish, and if not, then not. But I excluded a big chunk of the people in the world who consider themselves Jews, people who are not born from a Jewish mother, or who converted through non-Orthodox movements. Daniela talked about this a bit, especially about the conversion part, but I want to really dig into it with a focus on all the people who have a Jewish identity but are not Jewish according to the Orthodox view. So here goes. Until relatively recently, about 150 years ago, there was pretty much only one kind of Judaism with some local variations. The traditional Judaism that followed Jewish law as interpreted over thousands of years by the rabbis. In the 1800s, the Reform movement started, and since their converts were not required to commit to following Jewish law, referred to as the yoke of the kingdom of heaven in rabbinic parlance, they weren't considered Jewish by Orthodox Jews, and that's still the case today. Conservative Judaism is a bit more complicated, as they and Orthodoxy have split more slowly over time. Not so long ago, say 40 years, most Orthodox Jews would have accepted most conservative conversions. But today, the chasm between the two movements, versions of Jewish law, is seen as too wide. So now, according to most Orthodox Jews, all conservative conversions are not valid. And if that's not enough, if you're a Reform or conservative convert and now you're really mad at me for calling your Jewish identity into question, there's the question of patrilineal descent. According to traditional Jewish law, as Daniela mentioned, Jewishness is passed through the mother. If your mother is Jewish, you're 100% Jewish no matter who your father is. If your mother is not Jewish, you are 100% not Jewish, no matter who your father is. This means that, according to Orthodox Judaism, a growing proportion, and perhaps something approaching a majority, of Reform Jews are not Jewish. This disparity in our views of who is a Jew is potentially a tragedy of enormous proportions, and it threatens to split the Jewish people in two. Honestly, this is the number 2 threat to the Jewish people as far as I'm concerned, second only to the threat of nuclear annihilation from Iran, which I take very seriously. Now, I completely understand how insulting this is. Even from my side, which I believe in, this is deeply, heart-rendingly painful. I have friends and family who fall into these categories that I'm discussing. I also had discussions with them about this. I know it's terribly painful to have one's identity challenged in this way, and I know there are many, many people who are not Jews according to Orthodox Judaism whose core identity is built around being Jewish. It makes total sense that they would dismiss my opinion, turn off the podcast right now, if they haven't already, and start working on an angry email. But please, please stay with me a bit longer. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of how the rabbis interpret the Bible to say that the mother determines one's Jewishness. It's complicated and technical, and it won't impress anybody that doesn't already agree with me. Basically, somebody who's trained in classical rabbinics in an orthodox fashion. So, for our purposes, what's important to know is that for nearly 2,000 years, there has been pretty much no debate on this issue. For Jews, that's saying a lot. When the rabbis in the Jewish communities don't fight over something, it means it is broadly accepted. And when our rabbis continuously ruled the same way for thousands of years, that gives those rulings an incredible amount of authority in the Orthodox Jewish worldview. One cannot simply decide, again from an Orthodox perspective, that these laws are outdated and that we should change them. In some cases, Jewish law can be incredibly flexible and adaptive, and in other cases it can't. This falls on the non-flexible side. At the same time, without becoming Orthodox and converting by Orthodox standards, there's exactly nothing a person in this situation can do to make themselves Jewish in the eyes of this part of the Jewish world. That's the situation we find ourselves in. That's the way it is. Two opposing worldviews with at least two separate definitions of who is a Jew, one of which is exclusive of the other. And as painful as it is for any group to be meaningful, there have to be membership requirements. There have to be boundaries. And someone is always going to fall on the fuzzy gray middle of that boundary. And that is going to hurt. That's the problem we're left with here. So, back to how Orthodox people relate to this question. Obviously, some Orthodox people are jerks, and they won't be sensitive to this, just as they're not sensitive to other things, and just as some people in every group are not nice people. But I want to talk about the way I deal with this issue, which I think is sensitive, and I think most thoughtful Orthodox Jews can get behind. Remember how I said a minute ago that you're either 100% Jewish or 100% not? Well, that's true. But in Judaism, we have all kinds of categories. There's one called Jewish, and there's one called not Jewish. But in the Jewish category, there are subcategories that mean different things. There are members of nations who are trying to destroy us, enemy nations. There are members of friendly nations. There are Noahides, who are non-Jews that commit to keeping the 7 laws God gave to all the nations of the world after the flood. And there is also Zera Yisrael, the seed of Israel. These are people who are descendants of Jews, but are not Jewish according to Jewish law. We think of them kind of as expats from the nation of Judaism. We recognize we have a shared past, a cultural affinity, similar values and worldview, maybe even speaking the same language as each other. But they're not citizens of Judaism. For Seed of Israel, Zera Yisrael, we are allowed to encourage them to learn about Judaism and convert, which we generally don't do. We also make the conversion process less onerous in terms of time, though not in commitment to Jewish law. But for those who reject the very idea of conversion because you aren't going to be Orthodox or don't see a need, we still see you as members of our extended family. We still love you and we still want to be connected with you. We won't count you in a minyan, I'm sorry, but we will be happy to have you join us for a Shabbos meal. We won't call you up to the Torah, but we will be happy to include you in our extended family tree and connect with you, not as a random outsider, but as family who has moved to another country and whom we see only occasionally. Now, I know that's not very satisfying, especially for Jews of patrilineal descent who are truly committed to their Judaism. But for me, it's important to show that I'm trying. I'm not dismissing your pain. I'm trying my best within the boundaries of my Judaism to be as open, caring, and considerate as I can. And I know it's not perfect. I know it doesn't solve the problem. I don't know if there is a solution, but I do believe if we all look at each other with love and compassion and take a generous look at the intellectual and religious commitments of the other, we can hold off the big split I mentioned before. I pray every day for the coming of the Messiah, and this is one of the reasons. This is one of those issues that I think only he can really solve. But the fact that I can't solve a problem doesn't relieve me of responsibility for doing my best. I hope that if you can't love what I'm saying, you can at least like that I'm being honest with you. If you can't agree, perhaps you can respect. And perhaps respect, though not ideal, is enough. So, as part of the Ganze Mishpocha, the big Jewish family, or maybe a friend of the tribe, are you thinking about coming to Israel? You know what? Cancel those tickets to Cabo and plan a trip to the Holy Land instead, especially if you've never been, and especially now. I know people are afraid, but the truth is that the hot spots are very circumscribed. If you stay away from about 3 or 4 one-block wide areas in the entire country, you're out of the way of 99% of the violence going on here. Compare it to staying out of a bad neighborhood in Chicago. And everywhere you go, you know that you are making a statement that you stand with the Jewish people and the Jewish nation. Do you have kids? Do you want them to grow up with a strong Jewish identity? Bring them here. Let them know what it feels like to be in a Jewish state. Let them see the street signs in Hebrew and feel the love the people of Israel have for them as part of our extended family. If any of that speaks to you, go to rabbieitan.com, RABBIEITAN.com, and check it out. Send me an email, give me a call, and let's plan a trip that's not just a vacation, but a life-changing and life-enhancing experience for you and your family. That's all for this week's episode of Jewish Geography. We'll be back on Tuesday next week with another episode. In the meantime, have a great week.